Greetings, eco-nerdlings. In this podcast, I'm going to be discussing food chains, food webs, and the flow of energy through trophic levels. Before we get started on our food chains and food webs, I want to go through some of the basic vocabulary and terms you're going to be hearing throughout this podcast. Producers and autotrophs, consumers, which are also called heterotrophs. We have different levels of consumers when we're talking about food chains and food webs. We have primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. So let's go through some examples. So producers are organisms that can make their own food. They get energy from the sun that they convert into food that they themselves, as well as other organisms, can use. These are also referred to as autotrophic. Auto meaning automatic. So they automatically make their own food. We have two types of autotrophs. We have photoautotrophs, which get their energy from the sunlight, and we have chemoautotrophs. These are organisms such as bacteria that are found in hydrothermal vents way down deep at the bottom of the ocean. So for now, we're going to focus on the photoautotrophs, such as grass, trees, and flowers. Any type of plant would be classified as a photoautotroph because they're going to be using energy from the sun. Next, we're going to talk about consumers. There are many different types of consumers. So primary consumers can be referred to as herbivores, meaning that they eat only plants. And again, those are called primary consumers. They feed directly on producers such as grass, trees, plants, shrubs, fruits, all of those types of things. So, examples of primary consumers or herbivores would be deer, sheep, and little bunny rabbits. Next, we're going to talk about omnivores. I always love this graphic because it's like herbivore, eat plant, carnivore, eat meat, omnivore, and then an omnivore, which a lot of people are omnivores. So basically, omnivores eat both plants and animals. Next, we're going to talk about carnivores. These are meat eaters. These will be our secondary, tertiary, and quaternary consumers. Examples of these would be orcas. So this orca right here is waiting for this penguin who got pushed off by his mean friends. So this penguin's going to be orca food right now. So he's like, meep. And then wolves that are attacking this deer right here, those are also an example of a carnivore. So carnivores feed on other animals. We ourselves aren't technically classified as a carnivore, but I did want to bring up that we are pretty much the most deadly animal alive. We're responsible for more deaths of other species than any other species in the world. And sometimes we do kill other species for our own benefit. We do need food, so, we'll kill chickens and deer and cows and things like that to eat. But there are countless, acts that humans are committing where we don't really need to. So some of the things that we're doing are poaching elephants for their ivory. So we're killing elephants just for their ivory tusks. This is a shot of Japan and a whale harvest. So they herd all of these pilot whales into a harbor and they slaughter them. Same thing in Japan right here. This is a huge sperm whale that they killed for their blubber. Some people kill other predators for fun or sport, such as wolves. They'll go on safaris, kill lions, tigers, cheetahs. And one of the biggest problems right now is actually the decrease in the shark population because people are killing off sharks, number one, to make shark fin soup. So they're wasting the entire animal except its fins. Number two, they kill sharks just because they're scared of them, even though they account for less than 6 deaths a year. So another type of consumer that you may not really be thinking about that is one are scavengers. These feed on dead organisms, such as vultures, flies, and crows. There are also other types. We have decomposers and detrivores. Decomposers are consumers that release nutrients, and they're bacteria and fungi. Detrivores feed on dead bodies or other organisms. Detrivores are earthworms as well as vultures. So these are two examples of decomposers. We have a mushroom as well as a bacteria that will be breaking this animal down right here, and then these would be scavengers feeding off of them. So decomposers, again, fungi and bacteria, break down and recycle organic materials from organisms' waste and from dead organisms. They are food sources for worms and insects, and anything that's biodegradable can be broken down by composers, such as these mushrooms, worms, and bacteria. So detrivores, these live off detritus. Sometimes they live off of our skin, like our bed bugs. Eesh. So detritus parts of dead organism and waste or living organisms. Detritus feeders extract nutrients from partly decomposed organic matter, plant debris, and animal dung, or our dead skin cells. So we're going to talk about energy cycling, and we're going to talk about it cycling through the processes of cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Now I know all of my AP people that took biology last year like, oh no, ding ding dong ding, ding ding dong ding, magical word of electron transport chain. Nope, this is all you gotta know for AP Environmental Science. So photosynthesis, we're going to start out with carbon dioxide and water, so 6CO2 plus 6H2O reacts to give our glucose and oxygen. Reverse is cellular respiration. Okay, I'm conducting cellular respiration when I breathe in oxygen and I release water vapor and carbon dioxide. So in cellular respiration, they're using the product of cellular respiration, which is glucose and oxygen, to create carbon dioxide, water, but most importantly, it's going to create energy in the form of ATP. You guys should all remember that. So photosynthesis occurs in chloroplasts, while cellular respiration occurs in the mitochondria. Photosynthesis produces glucose and oxygen, while cellular respiration produces ATP and carbon dioxide. So looking here, we have a chloroplast. It gets its energy from the sun. Photosynthesis occurs in chloroplasts. Then, through the process of photosynthesis, oxygen as well as glucose is produced. The oxygen and glucose are used by the mitochondria for the process of cellular respiration, where carbon dioxide and ATP are produced. And again, it goes throughout a cycle over and over and over. So again, cellular respiration, we have light energy coming into the chloroplast. We have carbon dioxide coming in from the process of cellular respiration as well as water. The chloroplast uses energy from the sun to create glucose and oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. And the mitochondria produces chemical energy in the form of ATP. So we have aerobic respiration, meaning that oxygen is used. We need oxygen to turn that glucose back into carbon dioxide and water. But sometimes we don't have enough oxygen left, so we go into anaerobic respiration, which means without oxygen. It can also be called lactic acid fermentation or alcoholic fermentation. The end products are common compounds such as methane or acetic acid. So energy flow and nutrient cycling. There's a one-way energy flow from the sun, and then nutrient cycling of key materials. So we have our sun that gives its energy to our producers, which gives energy to our primary consumers, and so on and so forth. So we have ecosystem components. We have our sun, our producers, consumers, decomposers, and we also have cycling of all of the nutrients that occur. Food chains are movement of energy and nutrients from one trophic level to the next. And it just shows one single chain. So one organism gives its energy to the next, to the next, to the next. A food web is a network of interconnected food chains, and it's an actual representation of ecosystems and what occurs there. At each of those trophic levels though, so for example, if I go from grass to a rabbit, we're going to lose energy. So as energy flows through ecosystems and food chains and food webs, the amount of chemical energy available to the organisms at each succeeding feeding level decreases. So this is an example of a food chain. So in feeding relationships, all food chains start with energy from the sun, which is over here. Then the first level of all food chains is plants. So we have our plants right here, which give their energy to herbivores, or we could call them our primary consumers. Primary consumers give their energy to carnivores, which is right here, or mouse or shrew, which could be classified as well as a secondary consumer. Secondary consumers give their energy to top carnivores that are classified as tertiary consumers. And all of them are broken down by decomposers. So even the top carnivore, when it dies, is broken down by a decomposer. Most food chains usually go up only 4 or 5 levels, and all levels connect to those decomposers. So how much energy can you get from the food that's passed on from one trophic level to the next? The answer is only the energy that is stored in the organism itself. So these are two different types of food chains. We have one that's a terrestrial food chain right here that starts with a plant such as a flower, which is eaten by a grasshopper, which is eaten by a mouse, which is eaten by a snake, which is eaten by a hawk. So this would be our producer, this would be primary consumer, secondary, tertiary, and then quaternary. Over here is a marine food chain, which starts with phytoplankton. Phyto means plant, which is eaten by zooplankton, zoo means animal, which is eaten by a carnivorous fish, which is eaten by a larger carnivorous fish, which is eaten by a large carnivore, such as an orca, or it could be a seal, a shark, anything along the lines of that. And in each of those levels, 80 to 90% of the energy is lost from one level to the next. So only 10 to 20% of that energy is actually passed on from one level to the next. This is why we can only have food chains that go 4 or 5 levels up. So the loss of energy between levels of food chains is lost to many different things. We have it lost to waste or feces, and that's 50% of the energy. We lose a lot of it to cellular respiration, and only 17% is passed on to the next trophic level. So two terms I want to discuss real quick before we move on are biomass and pyramid of energy flow. Biomass is the dry weight of all organic matter of a given trophic level in a food chain or food web. The dry weight basically means that we've dehydrated it, taking all of the water out, and that's going to be our dry mass. A pyramid of energy flow is showing that 90% of the energy is lost with each of the transfer. So we call that the 10% rule. Only 10% of the energy is passed from one trophic level to the next. So looking here is a pyramid of energy flow. We're showing energy in this one in units in kilocalories. So if we start off with 10,000 kilocalories in producer of phytoplankton, only 1,000 or 10% of that is going to get passed up to the next level. So on and so forth. So energy flows through trophic levels. It starts off with energy from the sun getting taken into the producers, which are the plants. They have a loss of energy before the primary consumers can get to them, and another loss of energy before secondary consumers or carnivores can get to that energy source. So this is an example of a food web. We just discussed food chains. So food chains come together to form food webs in different ecosystems. And this is a better representation of what actually happens. Because a human doesn't only eat a chicken. We eat all kinds of stuff. So that's why we have food webs, to show that it's not just one type of food source that we're consuming, or one type of food source that other organisms are consuming. So looking at this food web right here, I'm going to go through a couple of food chains. I could start off with phytoplankton, which would be eaten by krill, which would be eaten by a petrel. I could start off with phytoplankton, which are eaten by herbivorous zooplankton, which are eaten by fish, which are eaten by a penguin, which is eaten by a leopard seal, which is eaten by a killer whale, which could be killed by a human. What I would like for you guys to do in your journals right now is come up with 4 other food chains that you can find within this food web. And make sure you bring it to class, because I am going to be checking those food chains that you get out of this massive food web. So again, it tells us who eats whom. Are you eating meat? Are you eating vegetables and plants? So there are many connections throughout all of the ecosystems. So food chain pyramid, again, the loss of energy between levels of a food chain is going to be 90% getting lost and only 10% getting passed up. So if we go with joules, we start off with 1,000,000 joules from the sunlight, which go into 10,000 joules, then 1,000, then 100, then only 10 get passed on to that tertiary consumer. So, with this line of thought, what do you think about vegetarians and meat eaters? how many vegetarians could the Earth support versus how many meat eaters could the Earth support? And which one could the Earth support more of? Well, the answer to that is that Earth could support more vegetarians than meat eaters, because vegetarians need less energy than meat eaters. Think about how much corn those cows are going to have to eat before we slaughter the cow to eat the cow. So think of it in those terms of energy going up. And remember that 90% of that energy gets lost and only 10% gets passed up from each level. So the next couple of slides I'm going to show you are just different representations that you might see on your exams. This is an energy pyramid. Again, it starts off with 100% and it goes up and losing 90% of the energy at each level. So if we start off with 100, the next level is 10, the next level is 1, and then the next level is 0.1%. And a pyramid of numbers is exactly what it sounds like. It's just showing you the number of that organism in that level. So I might say that, 10,000 blades of grass will support 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mice, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grasshoppers, and 1 rabbit. And all of those mice, grasshoppers, and rabbit will support 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 snakes, and all those 6 snakes will only support 1 hawk. So that's a pyramid of numbers. And I'm going to end with a pyramid of biomass. Again, remember, biomass is the dry weight, meaning all of the liquid or water has been sucked out of it. So this would be showing that 1,500 grams of grain are needed per 500 grams of chicken and per 50 grams of human tissue. So the two terms that we're going to end with are gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Gross primary productivity is the rate at which an ecosystem's producers convert solar energy to chemical energy in biomass, and this is given in kilocalories per meter squared per year. Net primary productivity is the rate at which the ecosystem's producers convert solar energy to chemical energy and subtracting the rate at which those producers use the energy for aerobic respiration. So the total, or the net gain. And ecosystems in different life zones have different net primary productivities. So looking at this, terrestrial ecosystems, our swamps, marshes, as well as tropical rainforests are going to have the highest amount of net primary productivity compared to extremely low net primary productivity in the deserts. In our aquatic ecosystems, the estuaries are going to have an extremely high net primary productivity, while the open ocean is going to have a very low net primary productivity. Well, I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you enjoyed this podcast or you just want to keep up with what's going on with all of the little nerdlings, you can follow me on Twitter at Queen Nerdling, or you can like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/nerdlingscience. This is the Queen Nerdling signing out. Stay nerdy till next time.